Hi, everybody. It's Mr. Pinkerton. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're being safe. Miss you guys. Big day today. My first ever video I've made. Wish me luck. Hopefully, this turns out okay. All right. Before spring break and before we had to leave because of coronavirus, we were talking about the early 1800s. All right. Actually, a little bit about the 1790s and starting the early 1800s. Remember, you did that project on a topic during the 1800s. We're done talking about the Revolutionary War. We're done talking about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, at least for a while. So on to the 1790s and early 1800s. All right. Remember, we were talking about George Washington as a president and the things that he had to deal with as a president. He hired a group of advisors called his cabinet that would later, give him some advice, and they got titles like Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, and Secretary of. Still to this day, the president has cabinet members that give him advice. Also, Washington and the country, we had to set up our own brand new economy. Remember, economics is the study of money and jobs and businesses and banks and how adults and teenagers use and deal with money. Also, Washington wanted to set up banks so that banks could loan out money to people so they could start their own business. That's still what banks do to this day. One issue that Washington had to deal with is create the first tax in this country on whiskey that's going to trigger this thing called the Whiskey Rebellion. That's something George Washington had to deal with. We talked about the Whiskey Rebellion for spring break. George Washington died December 14th, 1799, just a few weeks before the year 1800. In his honor, Washington, D.C. was created as the federal capital city, still is to this day. It's located in between Maryland and Virginia. During the early 1800s, we started to form our own identity as a country. People were pretty patriotic. People were into their own type of music and art and literature. And depending on how much money and your social status influenced what kind of music and art you were into, whether you could afford to have a portrait done of you and your family, or if you were more into folk art, or if you could afford to go to fancy ballroom cotillions or whatever. All right. Going back to economics, we also established capitalism as our economic policy, still have it to this day, in which people are able to buy and own private property. The government doesn't own everything. People have their own private property and they can buy and sell their own private property. We also started getting into the War of 1812. Not nearly as big as like the Revolutionary War or the Civil War, but it was an important event in U.S. history. Basically, England wanted a rematch with us. England kept stealing our boats, and technically a term called impressment, where they take our Navy soldiers and our boats out in the ocean and force them to be in the British Navy. They attacked this large boat called the USS Chesapeake that really made the U.S. mad and really got us into the war. Wars from 1812 to 1815. Basically, the United States of America thought that England was disrespecting us again. And, one thing that England did during the War of 1812 is they burned down the White House. We're currently on our second White House. So, also, England had Native Americans help out the British military. So it was really the U.S. Army versus England and Native Americans, a lot of Native American tribes. Actually, a lot of battles actually took place up in Canada. So, the U.S. had a couple important military generals who would eventually become presidents, namely Andrew Jackson and William Henry Harrison. Also, a gentleman named Francis Scott Key wrote a poem called The Star-Spangled Banner that would later become our national anthem. So, that's basically what we were talking about in March before spring break. Last but not least, we were talking about the first 10 presidents. So basically from 1789 to the middle of the 1840s. All right. Remember George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, main author of the Declaration of Independence, James Madison, James Monroe, John Quincy Adams, who was the son of the second president, John Adams, Andrew Jackson, the guy on the $20 bill, Martin Van Buren. Remember that guy? I showed you a picture of him and his amazing hair and the sideburns. William Henry Harrison, remember he was the president for about a month before he got sick and died. Then his vice president, John Tyler, took over. So anyway, that's what we were going over before spring break and before we had to leave Cascade. So anyway, I will give you guys an assignment on this later on. But yeah, just a quick review of the notes. Okay. Yeah, thanks for letting me do this video. I miss you all at Cascade. It's a big day today. You guys are awesome. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.